Hi. I'll put this down for a second. I'm going to walk. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming, joining us in person and also virtually. I'm Christine. I'm on the board for Girls in Tech. Karen, would you like to come up and say hello? You might need a mic. You might need this little mic as well.
Marketing, and I promise you, it looks cuter on you than it does on me. I promise you. My name's Karen Katz. I sit on the board of Girls in Tech with the amazing Christine Rodriguez. I just wanted to say welcome to those in the room, welcome to those in TV land. And I hope you really enjoy our Girl Boss Night. We haven't held one of these in real life for a very long time. So it's pretty exciting to be able to do mostly online, but to have a few people in the room as well. I'll be the one in the corner selling the new beanies. I got more in stock and hats. But realistically, we are just very excited to be able to bring events back. Thank you very, very, very much to Zip for hosting us tonight. We can't do what we do without the sponsors who support our mission to empower, to educate, and to network women in technology. Have a great night. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for doing what you're about to do. And thank you, you're a star.
Thank you. So a big welcome to anyone who's new to Girls in Tech and a huge welcome back to those that have stuck with us, especially the last couple of years, moving everything into a hybrid mode. For those that are new to our community, Girls in Tech is a not-for-profit. We've been around since 2007 and we were started by a woman called Adriana Gascoigne in Silicon Valley, which you can imagine in 2007 had a bit of a bro-grammar culture and there wasn't as many women sort of in the industry. And she wanted to bring something to life that could connect women also from a networking perspective, but from an education, empowerment, and to be able to just get together and do things like this. So we've been around for quite some time. We've been in Australia for about 6 years, and Karen's been on the board since the very beginning. I kind of joined halfway through that. And we've only been in Sydney for a couple of years, and we got obviously cut with COVID. So we're going to be doing a lot more events and things moving forward. And what drives our event and what drives our community, and a big thank you goes to our volunteers, and there's a lot of volunteers in the room tonight who have come to support us. These events can't happen without our sponsors and without our volunteers helping us pull everything together. And I give you all a wave, you know who you all are, getting here early and helping us set up. So a big thank you to everyone that helps pull this together and helps us bring these to life. Now tonight our panel is, we're joined by a lovely panel. We're going to be talking about building for inclusivity. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick off really quickly to our panelists to introduce themselves so that we know who we're talking to, and then we'll dive into our questions. So Lauren, to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren McCormack. I'm the Director of Consumer Product here at Zip. So I look after our two main consumer-facing products, Zip Pay and Zip Money, our mobile app, all of our payments and some of the other features that we have in the app. This is a really interesting topic to me. I've been interested in DEI for a long time, both sort of internally in organisations and also looking at our customers. Little anecdote, when I was in my early 20s, I was a backpacker and I actually worked as a live-in carer for people with spinal injuries, which was probably the first time that I really got an insight into how some people sort of experience the world and how it can be difficult for different people to navigate the world. So that's probably where my interest started.
And before we kick on, I know you're from Zip, so we do have Larry from Zip at the back who wants to come up and say a few words. So would you mind coming up the front here? Yes? One of our sponsors. We'll hand you the mic. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming and good to see you all. We want to welcome Girls in Tech here, IRL, in real life, and out there, and it's great to be partnering. I think, at Zip, a couple of things about us. We are very much about diversity, and I think if, the two messages I would say is, one is, we have this concept of being fearless, and you can't come to work and really be fearless if you can't bring your whole self. So we're very focused on, if it's Ramadan or Rosh Hashanah, we're setting targets 40, 40, 20 in kind of gender, all the way from board, all the way down, and we're very, very committed to it. And I'm also very excited when my son goes to Code Camp, that it's now 50-50, right? So I'm looking forward to in 18 years' time. And so we're very passionate to be partnering with you guys, and very glad to be hosting. And I think also last year we had a great data scientist at Zip, Ahana, and she shared with me the book Invisible Women. And so for me, getting the how right is really important, but also getting the what right. And so it's not just about having inclusivity in the company, but it's also the products that we build where we're trying to disrupt financial services, make it incredibly inclusive. When people click the Zip button, they know that we have their back. And so therefore, how do we avoid biases in product? And I think that book for me showed me the parks that are designed in Sweden that are incorrect, or the fact that money goes into plowing roads versus streets, but actually it's more effective for streets. And I think debunking all these myths is incredibly important. So we're passionate about the what and the how, and look forward to tonight.
Thank you.
Over to you guys.
So thank you, Lauren and Larry, both from Zip. Now, we do have some other guests with us tonight. So Kat, do you want to tell us where you're from and what D&I means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. For those I haven't met, my name's Kat Hartman. I'm the General Manager of Experience and Content at WooliesX as part of the Woolworths Group. By title, that's what they call me, but my role is actually, we're an agile organization. My role is the experience practice lead. So what that means from a day-to-day perspective is I have the distinct privilege of leading the teams who build the crafts and capabilities that go into our squads and tribes each day to deliver the end-to-end digital customer experiences for our customers across our ecosystem. And that can be everything from our Woolworths app or website all the way through to how customers shop digitally in store. And equally, we also support our group brands across our ecosystem. So when you think about the digital experience you might have had looking for your book week costume for your child, which is something I've been doing a lot of this week in Big W, that's really a focus for the teams, and we support and enable that. So I have been, I think, someone who was born into a family where my mother was deeply passionate about inclusion and diversity. And as a woman who worked her whole life and really focused on ensuring that she brought up daughters who understood the opportunities that existed for them, but equally brought up daughters who cared for others and opened the door for others along the way as well. That's been a huge driver for me and something that I bring into my day-to-day. I think I also focus within WooliesX on diversity inclusion through two main guilds. We have our Diversity and Inclusion Guild, which is an internal facing guild that really ensures that we're setting the right standards for ourselves and holding ourselves really accountable, and equally digital accessibility, which is key for our customers. So great to be here, a topic that is very close to my heart, and looking forward to the conversation this evening.
And Leanna, over to you.
Hi, I'm Leanna. So I'm a growth product manager at Eucalyptus. For those who don't know, Eucalyptus is a house of brands, so similar to like Unilever or Louis Vuitton, owning a bunch of awesome brands. Eucalyptus owns brands in particular that are focusing on, Eucalyptus focuses on health brands, what we call like digital clinics, that are mainly working in spaces where there's a lot of stigma around it, or problem with getting access to that healthcare. So for example, one of our brands is obesity management, Juniper. So there we have focusing a lot on bridging the gap of bringing medication to people who aren't usually able to access it themselves through the doctor, or for example, for Violet, which is like a male mental health, male brand. We are focusing a lot on, for example, sexual health or mental health, where people and men are not really usually comfortable talking about those topics. As a product manager at Eucalyptus, my role is mainly taking the features that our platform team has built. So we have platform teams, and then we have brand specific teams, taking those features and personalizing for each of those brands and making sure that all of our features actually solving the underlying problems of those very specific brands. For me personally, diversity has always been a really big topic. I was born and raised in Ukraine. My parents are Vietnamese. So for most of my life, I felt like the other in a group. In Ukraine, I was the only Asian person where I would go. In Australia, I landed and I found out there are a lot of actual different Asian communities that I didn't realize before, that there are not just Vietnamese food, there's also dumplings and Thai, and that was the highlight of my life. So like little things like that, even landing to Australia, I didn't really feel like a true Asian because I grew up in a primarily like white dominated community where all I wanted to be is white. So I think by attending events like this, like Girls in Tech, I realized that how important diversity and celebrating diversity is. Um, and now I'm very proud to be Vietnamese and Ukrainian. And also being cultural diverse is a bit cool nowadays, which is my favorite uh, thing. But yes, very excited to talk about diversity and how we also um, thinking about diversity when building products at Eucalyptus.
So just for everybody in the room, we are going to unpack some of those points that our panelists sort of dug into. So at the end, we'll have a few questions you can ask from the room. But what we'll do is we'll just take a little bit of a deep dive into some of those themes. And I forgot to introduce myself. And just before we go, I just want to say shameless plug. Leanna was actually a volunteer as well. So if you're thinking about volunteering for Girls in Tech, we have a shining example of someone who's really enjoyed our community. I'm Christine. I work at Adobe, so I forgot to mention that before at the beginning, and what diversity and what this topic means to me. So diversity obviously being part of Girls in Tech is very important, and I've already spoken about where we fit into the scene. Personally, like similar to Lauren, I actually have someone at home. My partner has a brain tumor, and seeing like the way that technology impacts the way that his life can be, change for the better, or things that are quite difficult that sometimes technology could enhance. Some of those things really make me excitable about some of this building for inclusion. So I'm really grateful for Zip for suggesting the topic and bringing it to the forefront. And I would have to say it's probably our most popular topic that we've ever had, with, like I said, over 400 registrants for tonight, just to listen and hear from our experts. So Lauren, let's take a little bit of a deep dive with you. You did quickly touch on what you do at Zip and your role, but also could you paint us a bit of a picture about who your audience is in response to what you actually do day to day?
Sure. So Zip is a point of sale lender. We have two consumer products, Zip Pay and Zip Money. Zip Pay is for everyday purchases. It's an account you start with up to $1,000 monthly payment, and it's very much for everyday spend, groceries, fuel, your small everyday purchases. We also have Zip Money, which is, again, in-store financing for life's bigger purchases. So that's targeted more, you go into a store and you buy a couch, or we go up to $50,000 for people to buy a pool or solar panels for their home. So we've got a broad range of products targeted at a really broad range of customers. We have 3.2 million customers across Australia and New Zealand. Zip is global, a global organisation. My role is ANZ. So across Australia and New Zealand, we have just over 3 million customers. They skew slightly young, so millennial and younger, but millennials are turning 40 now, so I don't know if we can call ourselves young anymore, and skew slightly female. But other than that, it is pretty much a broad representation of the Australian population. We have people in the city, we have people in the country, we have families with children, we have younger people who might be living at home, or people living out of home with no children. I did look before today to see if we have any data, but we actually don't, unfortunately, collect data on how many of our customers are living with a disability or are neurodiverse. We don't have data on how many speak English is a second or third or potentially fourth language. But with 3 million customers across Australia, it's pretty safe to assume that it's largely representative of the Australian population. So we would have a lot of people within our customer base who have different needs. And obviously when we're designing our products, we need to think about all of those different customers and how they might interact with our product and what they might need from us.
And you're mainly consumers or B2B?
So Zip overall, so we have consumer products. We do have some business lending products as well, but we also were a two-sided market. So we have merchant clients as well. So we have a merchant product team who looks after the experience for our merchant customers, and we have a commercial team who talk to our merchant customers. And obviously on that side as well, we would have employees of our merchants who may need to access our products in various ways. So we definitely look at both sides in our product team.
I'm going to dig a little bit deeper at that later. So Kat, you said you're from WooliesX. Give us a little bit of a rundown for those that aren't familiar, where WooliesX sits in the market, what you're responsible for, your mission, that kind of where you've come from.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I do a poll actually? Who in the room knows what WooliesX is? Okay, perfect. That's great to see. Quite a lot of you. So most of you would know WooliesX is, we formed in 2017 and really focused on supporting the needs of our customers through digital data technology and really bringing our loyalty program together to unlock everyday outcomes for all Australians. And our customers are absolutely all Australians. And so we do support such a diverse subset of our community, and we support the population more broadly as well. And so that does really inform our thinking every day. And we spend a lot of time, particularly in my teams, thinking about actually how do we step out of our own perspectives and our own lived experiences to think about others, and therefore having a diverse team is really important to us, and something we were discussing actually before the panel started. We really recognise the fact that in the industries that we represent at WooliesX, digital data and technology, there is a need to be focused on diversity. Gender diversity was a real focus for us initially. And I think we talked about the 50-50 code camp participation. Pieces like that are front of mind for us and do inform how we think about not just how we represent everyday Australians, but how we build teams that are representative of everyday Australians. And really, I think over the past 4 years, we've grown and evolved, really significantly when it comes to WooliesX as an organisation. And with that has also our product offerings and the diversity of services that we offer to Australians has grown and evolved. And when you think about some of those businesses that I mentioned before, and equally our everyday rewards proposition, it is really important to us that we're thoughtful of how we organise around the work in a way that's going to ensure that whether we're thinking about screen readers or whether we're thinking about how a customer is able to enter our stores in a way that is supportive of their needs, that's really front of mind for us. I think the only other thing I'll call out is our purpose at Woolworths Group is we create better experiences together for a better tomorrow, and that's really the thing that we rally around. And certainly that representation of better together is key to what we do and key to how we make decisions when it comes to creating those right services and propositions for our customers.
Yeah, fantastic. I think you sort of said to me, like, it's all Australians, like there's no one sort of, outside of your scope. Leanna, you did summarize a little bit about what Eucalyptus is. To get a little bit deeper about the House of Brands, it seems to me that it was created out of diversity because you've got very distinct. Do you want to go through, paint us a picture of Eucalyptus in its sort of foundational stage and the different brands and who they service?
Yep. Yes. So at Eucalyptus, we have now 4 brands. So one of them, for example, is Juniper, which I mentioned before, and it's mainly focusing on obesity, and providing access to a medication for obesity, specifically for women who are going through the menopause. The second brand is Violet, which is a male health brand, and it's mainly focusing on providing sexual health access, hair loss access, on all the things that men basically don't like talking about and avoid going to the GP and delivering it discreetly to their door. The third brand is Software. So you might have been bombarded by our bunch of ads, but Software is a prescription graded medication. So we are trying to provide access to what dermatologists are hiding behind their secret $300 fee and give it to every women and man in Australia, and also personalizing that solution to the unique qualities of the skin. And the last one is skin. So Kin is focusing on the whole fertility journey. So starting from contraception, when when a young woman like me talks to the doctor, and they obviously like trying to put a bunch of different stigma on like why do you need that contraception, what contraception do you need. Oftentimes men, well, not men, oftentimes doctors are also not aware that there are 70, for example, or 80 different brands of different types of contraception that you can offer to the woman to make sure that it works for her, which is why what Kin is focusing on, is like providing that specialized access to fertility specialists as well. So if you notice, each of our brands have stigma in a society around it. People don't like talking about it, or it's really, really expensive to access it, or also for very busy men and women and who don't have time, for example, to go to the GP or to go to the dermatologist and go to the GP, get the referral to dermatologist or to the fertility test, and go through the whole system, broken system of our healthcare to get that access. So they usually would not adhere to the medication. It's also considered to be often not like you're gonna die from that medication, from that disease. Like you're not gonna die from not having, for example, a contraception, which is why the consideration even on a government level is not as high as, for example, for cardiovascular diseases. The magic of Eucalyptus is you can go to a website, fill out a quiz that I work a lot on, that asks you all the questions that we believe are super important for the doctor to make the decision. We would then provide access to talk to the doctor online, that we work very hard to educate on all the uniqueness of that specific brand, on that brand, like of that specific condition, so that they can make the best personalized decision for that brand, for the person, and deliver it discreetly, because not everyone wants to share their contraception pill with all their 7 housemates to their door. Yeah, so that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of what you're talking about is, you've born these ideas from, whether it's a stigma or a certain subsection of a medical condition, or it's not necessarily this whole, you go to the doctor and you figure it out. It's like some things are like, yeah, we kind of know what's going on. We just want to get cut to the chase. So you've actually sort of carved out all those different diverse sets of, society, and sort of built a product around those diverse groups. So I think that's a really amazing company. Before we delve too much into, the themes around what we have been doing, I thought I'd kick over to Lauren. We had an interesting chat around, product versus engineering versus designing versus marketing. Like who is coming into play? And obviously everyone's welcome to comment on this question. Like who's coming into play when we're thinking about how to carve out these niche customers, or how to carve out, who's going to be using the product, and how do we address that?
Sure. So I might start, before I sort of talk about roles and responsibilities, a little bit around what inclusion means to me, or to Zip, in terms of what we're actually covering. Because I think when I told a lot of people I was on this panel and I said it's about designing products for inclusion, everyone jumped straight to accessibility. Like, oh, can a colorblind person read it? And absolutely, like screen readers, accessible for people who are colorblind, is really important, and that's a critical part of building your products to be accessible, but it's only part of the problem or the solution in my mind. Accessibility is a key piece. I think it's also really important that people understand the product and what they're signing up for in the flows. So I might not be colorblind and I can read all the words on this page, but if English is my third language, or if I'm neurodiverse and I take everything very literally, do I actually understand what I'm signing up for? And then there's also the piece around people feeling represented and seeing themselves in the imagery that you're using, or so for example, are all of the food pictures of Anglo food, all of the people white, those kind of things where people actually feel like this is a product for me. So in that, I'll talk a little bit about how Zip is sort of structured and how we build products. Obviously, the whole organization is focused on building products and building products for inclusion, but there's kind of 4 teams that are specifically involved, and that is product, design, engineering, and marketing. They all have a role to play in inclusivity, but I think they all have a slightly different role to play. Product is my area of expertise, so I'll obviously talk the most about that. I don't profess to understand engineering in great levels of detail. But I think in an organization like Zip, and it's probably similar for a lot of other sort of tech organizations, the primary role that a product manager plays is that you are the voice of the customer in that organization. You represent the customer in meetings, you think about, you define who the customer is and how we want to build for that customer. And I think it's really important when we're defining who our customer is that we're really specific about inclusion. If I was to say to you all right now, I'm going to write a persona and Mary has 2 children and she lives in the suburbs, I would imagine everyone just pictured a white, able-bodied person, right? So if we want our engineers and our designers to be thinking about diversity, we need to be really specific in how we define who our customer is. So if you, and this is something, you know, any product managers here or on the call could actually probably go next week and have a look at. Like if you have 6 personas for your customers, does one of them specifically say, Mary is colorblind? Or Mary recently arrived in Australia and English is her 3rd language. Mary needs a screen reader. Like actually being really prescriptive about who the customer is will be really helpful when you go down the track and we're designing user stories and we're doing acceptance testing. It gives you that very clear criteria that you need to be building for. And obviously for every organization, the customer base will be different, but they're things that we should all be thinking about, especially when we're designing digital products. The other really important role that product plays throughout the whole product development cycle is prioritization. So, you know, literally every day in stand-ups, product managers will be prioritizing A over B. They'll be figuring out when something, you know, is good enough to ship. And another question that product managers should be asking themselves is, where does inclusivity sit in your prioritization scale? Are you prioritizing getting something out 3 days earlier, or are you prioritizing something looking nice over it being inclusive? And is that something you want to accept? And there's a real, obviously it's the right thing to do to build for inclusion, but there's a business case for it as well. I mean, I've read today 20% of the Australian population has a disability, 20% speak a language at home other than English. There's probably some overlap in those groups, but if you don't design for all types of customers, you're actually cutting out a big part of your market. So it's not just a nice thing to do, it also really makes a lot of business sense. Design and engineering obviously have more technical a technical role to play. You know, I don't profess to know exactly how to build something so that a colorblind person is able to read it, but that is something that designers should be thinking about and upskilling on. Similar with engineers, like how do you build something so that a screen reader can read it effectively? That's what, and as a product person, that's what you need to be leaning on your design and engineering colleagues to help you with. And then marketing, lastly, I think certainly within Zip, marketing's role is around making sure all customers see themselves represented in our imagery, whether that's on social media or in EDMs. What imagery we're using, and how are we making sure that everybody feels like that Zip is for them.
I hear a lot of things here. So I like how you broke down inclusivity into things like accessibility. You talked about demographics, financial literacy, language, visibility. Like when we think about, you know, like you said, it being one thing, like it just being accessibility, or it just being something, when we're not actually encompassing all of the inclusive factors. So, you know, take notes, take that back to your, you know, challenge your colleagues tomorrow. And that brings me to sort of Kat, you talked to me a little bit about, you know, the time period during the pandemic and who you sort of shaped your, like targeted your activities towards, and you talked about vulnerable as a category. Can you delve a little bit into, you know, that method and how that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, before I do, I think the articulation of the role that we all play in delivering that outcome for customers when it comes to, making sure that our designs and products are diverse and inclusive is so important, and certainly something everyone can take away. It isn't something that sits in the domain of product or design or engineering or marketing or any of the other capabilities or crafts that might be involved in exclusivity. And that's certainly something we focus on, is how do we bring everyone into the fold and make sure everyone has the right skills and training to be able to achieve that delivery of the most inclusive products possible. And so when I think about the pandemic, I don't like to often, frankly, but when I do, it really was, in a lot of ways, I talked about a purpose before. In a lot of ways, the pandemic was a bit of a gift in terms of our ability to live that purpose each and every day. So like every business and every person in every household across Australia and globally, we were faced with a scenario that was absolutely uncharted, and there was no roadmap or direction forward. And as an essential service provider for all Australians, we had to very quickly figure out what was important. And for us, it was prioritising our vulnerable customers and our elderly customers, and ensuring that we were making decisions for them first. And as someone who is passionate about diversity and inclusion, that was just absolutely wonderful to watch. And the team did it by instinct. So when it came to conversations around we've got unprecedented demand for our e-commerce proposition and for customers to be able to get groceries to their home, what are we going to do? It was by nature that the team made a recommendation to say, actually, we need to shut down our e-commerce proposition to everyone except our vulnerable customers. And so that was what we called our Priority Assist product. And ultimately, that was what was available for that key customer group during those early first days of COVID. And I think as COVID evolved, we evolved, and the team's thinking evolved as well. And quickly they started to think, well, actually, it's not enough to be able to offer particularly elderly customers at that time the ability to place an e-commerce order. Gosh, they probably don't even know how to place. A lot of them won't have used equally for our customers who use screen readers or may not have had an account with us before and may have chosen to shop in store. And that's where our Basics box was born of, and that was a partnership between Woolworths and other key businesses like Australia Post to be able to create a box that an elderly or vulnerable customer could order with as close as a single click as possible. So a box that was pre-packed, pre-selected. We had times when the team were sitting in the office going, okay, so we've got flour, we've got milk, we've got bread. Can you cook a meal? No. Okay, what else do we need? Okay, all right. So we've got some tea in there. We've got the no. Okay, let's go back to the beginning again. And these conversations that we had, our heads of strategy and just everyone from the team mucking in to try and figure out what would go in that box. It was just really wonderful to watch, and just, as I said, such an activation of our purpose. And equally, as we moved into a much more sustained period of lockdown, opening up the supermarkets for that hour first thing in the day early to allow customers to with additional needs or who were particularly vulnerable to be able to come in, get first access to products that were running out the door a little bit more quickly than we might have liked at the time, and equally to be able to shop in a safe way because we were having larger numbers of customers coming through the stores. That was a real focus. So there was just all these things that, as I said, we said to the team, go, run, you know what our purpose is, we trust you to do the right thing. And it was just simply amazing to watch what came out of it and how that came to life. And equally, I'd love to sleep for a few years after.
Yeah, I love that, doing the right thing. and you're taking the responsibility as a company to do that. And it doesn't have to be a huge company, but anybody can sort of step into the conversation and step into, you know, diversity and how we, you know, build our product, big or small. Now, Leanna, you talked to me a little bit about, so we're all sitting here in lovely Sydney, you know, CBD. You talked to me a little bit about how the products that you guys design actually serve a purpose for rural Australians. And can you sort of walk us through the difference between, you know, how the technology enhances that experience versus, you know, what would typically be like to, you know, contact the doctor from that scenario?
Yes. So for a lot of our brands, as I mentioned before, there's a big accessibility gap of just having enough time to go to the GP, get the script, then go to the pharmacy, which needs to have your medication, and then go all the way back to your house and do it all over again. For example, for contraception pill, you need to do it every 3 months or every 2 months. And oftentimes women don't have enough time to go, especially if they are shift workers or if they're living in more rural Australia. So for a lot of customers, we need to think about, hey, what postcode they're in. How can we, for example, optimize the delivery flow to make sure that they get that medication on time? Something like medication, especially the antidepressant ones, you can't just not deliver or have being like, hey, we're out of stock. So something that we often think about is, hey, in cases that we run out of stock for this particular antidepressant, how can we ensure that we provide access still to the healthcare for that person? So very recently we had out of a national-wide outage of the medication for our weight loss brand, Juniper, where none of the patients were able to get access to a medication. So the way the medication is called Saxenda. So the way it works is you need to inject a pin every day, and that suppresses your appetite and helps you build, like adjusts your metabolism to be able to lose weight. So to ensure that you don't have very severe side effects, to ensure that the medication works, you need to take it every day. If you skip the medication, then you might have very severe side effects. You might go through like nausea, etc. Your whole body will start readjusting back to where it was. And it's actually really dangerous. So for us, we wanted to make sure that all of those patients, especially the existing patients, had access to the medication straight away. So we would, for example, organize the whole focus group where everyone made sure that we had a backup plan for those patients during this nationwide shortage, where we paid probably premium to ensure to send the medication to those patients. We also would, in other scenarios, we used to give away script to the patients directly and send them the pharmacies nearby that would have that medication, so they don't go through that horrible experience that I described before. And I think, like, for me, every time that happens, I realize how that I'm not just working for online skincare brand that looks very pretty and cool, but it's actually someone's medication and health. Even something like skincare, if people, we would have women miss their delivery date, or their packages would be lost or broken. And actually, that'd be like 3 days before their wedding or their best friend's wedding. And they would go through this whole, again, side effects of readjusting the medication. And those like stories are really horrible. So, which is why, like in the product team and engineering team and in operations in particular, we want to make sure that that scenario is 100% covered at all times.
So planning for the norm, and then planning to mitigate the
Yeah.
problems. And then, you know, it's fair, like you say, you know, you have to do all these steps, like go to the doctor, get the script, go to the pharmacy, go to the post office. But what if you're in rural Australia and your post office is 2 hours away, or doesn't even exist anymore, and things like that? So I love how you guys brought that to life, and like you said, through focus groups and understanding who your customers actually are. I'm going to switch. I'm all over the place, just so we know we're going off script here. So Lauren, back to you and sort of in that theme, like how do you've worked for B2C companies, you've worked for B2B companies. How do you really put yourself into the shoes of of your user? Like how do you actually like go there? What do you do? What do you learn? How do you come from a different angle?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think it's probably like most product managers, there's multiple different ways. When I was reflecting on this as a person, I am very interested in people. So when I look at the podcasts I listen to or the books I read, they're mostly biographies or people's stories, interviews with people. And I think you can't underestimate if you read a novel where the protagonist has autism, like that gives you insight into someone's life that would be different to yours, even if it's a novel. So I think it's a really common trait, but it's a really important trait for product managers to be interested in people and in different people in the world. So that's sort of me, I guess, as a person. In terms of work more specifically and understanding our customers, talking to your customers is really important. So I still, as a director of product, I still try and join in when we're doing like UX interviews so that I can listen and hear directly from our customers. We do call center listening. So we'll listen in to calls both from customers and from merchants so that we can understand what's coming through. We ran some focus groups a couple of months ago that were very sort of broad ranging, and we were just asking people basically to talk about money and how, well, their lives firstly, and then money in their lives and how they manage money and how they think about it, and are they fearful of it, or they don't really think about money or care about it. And it's just really interesting to hear different people, because we all, and money is the kind of topic that most people have a set way of. They either think about it a lot or they don't. And it's really interesting to hear different people talk about it and what their experience is with it and how it fits into their life. And I think no matter what level you're in an organization, talking to your customers is really, really important. And I think that the last thing, which indirectly, I guess, helps understand customers, is making sure that you have really diverse teams and that everyone in those teams has a voice. Because if you've got a diverse team of 10 people, chances are someone in that team or someone's sibling or child might be neurodiverse. You're likely to have someone who has a parent who doesn't speak English. And so by having a diverse team and giving everyone in that team a voice and the freedom to speak up and say, I don't think this is going to work for this type of person, it really helps you to get a full view of all different types of people and how they might interact with the product that you're building.
I think for the people that aren't in product in the room, that have different roles in your organization, like you can still, be interested, be curious, look at podcasts. I mean, like I said, I've got someone at home and I watch him, but I also Google the hell out of everything that I see to try to find out, is this something that other people are experiencing? But if you're not in a team where you're directly influencing what the way they're building the product, there's a lot of companies have, diversity guilds or representations or, inject yourself into a project that you're interested and you're passionate about. And often it's knowing about something, not allowing, not sort of making it that the person that has the issue is the one that has to bring it to light. So, asking the person with the disability to be the one to bring it to the table is not the answer in your organization. It's like, who are the people that are championing it and being that sort of ally for those who can't speak for themselves or who may not be in the room or able to do that.
Can I say one practical thing we do at Zip that you've just reminded me of? So we use Slack, and we have a Slack channel called Product Feedback that has, it's Product Feedback AU, and it has 600 people in it. And I'm pretty sure we have about 600 people in Australian products. So the whole organization is free to provide feedback on this screen doesn't make sense or it doesn't read very well, and that's not just about inclusivity, that's about the product overall. But it's a really active channel and it gives everyone in the organization an equal voice to raise feedback about how our product is working.
Yeah, that's really, I've been in a company where they had an email address for friends of staff, because if you got yelled at a barbecue, you needed to be able to send them somewhere, right? And when you worked for a telco and the network collapses, there's a lot of barbecues and a lot of issues. Sort of in the same sort of vein, like Kat, you're obviously a leader in your organization as well. How do you as a leader sort of drive the purpose, within your organization? And also in the same vein, like how do your team bring it to light to you to be able to take forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm fortunate in that the culture that we've created at Woolies X is one that is very open and transparent. And so when we, any of us, regardless of where you sit within a hierarchy of an organisation, see something that we want to change, there is that space to be able to do that. And I think the how behind it can often feel a little bit overwhelming, particularly at the International Women's Day lunch this year. There was that really kind of salient point raised around the fact that the burden of solving diversity and inclusion issues often sits with those who are the ones that are most disadvantaged within the situation. And so for all of those allies that have come today to support and in some scenarios absolutely put myself within that category as well, it is so important that that load is shared beyond, and I think you raised that really well. It can feel though a little bit overwhelming at times, and I think when looking at solving some of these challenges, it is around being really clear on what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and equally who are those allies within the business who can help you solve it. So is it a peer or a leader who you know to be deeply passionate in this space, and forming that support. I'm a big advocate, maybe because of the role that I play and the business that I work in, a big advocate for the importance of data and insights. And so, making sure that you have a really strong story to tell in terms of not just the benefits for team and customers, but some of those commercial benefits that we spoke about before as well. I mentioned before, really a strong culture around inclusion. So if I look back, we formed in 2017. When we formed, we certainly didn't form with a diversity and inclusion guild or a digital accessibility guild. Those are the things that have come along the way because a team member has put up their hand and said, hey, I think there's an opportunity for us to do better in this space, or to think more thoughtfully, or to organise collectively around that. And that's allowed us to have a lot more impact, both in the way that we think about our team and how we set our teams up for the right kind of diversity of thought and the right kind of representation, and equally for the products and services we then ultimately deliver to our customers and the experiences that we give them day in and day out. So really, I think summary is find the allies, understand the data and insights, wrap it up in a really clear narrative, and make the space. Equally, if you are someone who is in a position where they are the one experiencing a level of disadvantage, find an ally who's not, to help carry that burden with you, because that can be really much more impactful if we go together. I think that old adage of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together is a really important one.
Yeah, and I'd love to know, like, in the room, like, are people part of these guilds or these diversity groups in your organization? Like, any raise of hands? Do you have? Yeah, we've got a few in the room. If you're not, does your organization have them? And if they do have them and you're not part of them, like, why? Is there some way that you can get involved in some of those, or are there groups that are missing? I mean, we're always adding to to our our understanding of different groups and different subsections within our fold. So yeah, get involved. I would encourage that. And if you don't have allies, you don't know how to do it, speak to people, because the greatest thing that we can do, and this is why we bring this conversation to the light, is to be able to say, hey, we're going to share something, and you take it back and you share it with 10 people, and it kind of sort of goes like a snowball.
And I think that last piece around, do those groups exist? Don't underestimate the impact that a group of people coming together around a common cause can actually have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when I speak to people, even in our at work or at events, sometimes I'll hear the same theme just randomly come up in 3 or 4 conversations. Like someone recently told me that their child was diagnosed with ADHD. And then in the same 3 weeks, I actually heard 3 other parents say that to me at events. And it was like, actually, this is something that's going on. But the way that their children were handling it was very different to how I would have expected. They're like, no, they talk about it to their friends, and they're like, oh, a light just switched on. And I'm really enjoying the fact that we're bringing these sort of conversations to light. It's reducing the stigma and allowing them a platform to talk about it. And I think that once you start listening and getting involved, then I can go and sort of have that conversation with other people, even though I don't have teenage children that have that. It's bringing those conversations to light and reducing the way that, you know, they're perceived from the outside. My last question, we've jumped all over the place, but I did want to sort of touch a little bit around that to Leanna. Like you said that you're, you know, your team, you focus on things like obesity management and conditions that you may not yourselves even have as a group. So can you take us through a little bit how you, put yourself into the shoes and how you actually understood and some of those nuances that maybe you discovered about different, like specifically that one I found really interesting.
Yes. So as I mentioned, we have a bunch of brands. Not going to repeat it again. All of them have very different personas that are most of the time very different from how I am and how I look, as well as like how my team looks. So, for example, we have a male brand, and that talks about sexual health problems, and men really don't like talking about it. And for example, to ensure that we're still solving problems for that customer persona, we couldn't just schedule like customer interviews, and no one was replying to us. And of course, like we are trying to provide discreet healthcare, and then we are asking for their phone number. So instead, we need to be creative with our customer research, and for example, go on Reddit and have a read about all the things that about hair loss where men just freely talk about under like a hidden username. Or for example, read our comments in Facebook, where we would post a meme, like we have a marketing strategy for talking about stigmatized sexual health with memes. So men love like tagging each other, but also that's when they would also open up, interestingly, in comment sections rather than like an interview to a young female like me. Interestingly, from those like insights, we learn how different that, for example, customer persona is from obviously a female customer persona. So when we launched Juniper Weight Loss as well as like weight loss management in Violet, which is a mainly male dominated brand. And as a product manager, we launched a really successful experiment in one brand, and talking about medication and how it like affects your risk of diabetes, etc., and make it like really beautiful experience for men, like heavily focusing on stats. And interestingly, I was like, great, it had 50% uplift if you're product manager growth. It was huge numbers. And then we copy pasted that experience into a female brand. And for Juniper, which much more focused on menopausal women who are going through like obesity. We copy pasted that experience, obviously changed a little bit of a tone of voice and the brands of the colors, but thought surely it will work. And no, it was the same like 5% conversion rate. And I was like, why? Like, don't women also obviously love to learn more about like deep dives into the medication? What is the clinical program? And when we interviewed women actually from that demographic, much more were responsive to acknowledgement and personalization and that empathy angle. And that's what they really wanted to hear from the doctor to ensure that the doctor like understood them. And that's why they got like prescribed this medication. Whereas for men, they didn't really want to talk to the doctor. They want to like quickly go through and just like read on their own time much more about medication. So it's something that I always think about, like start to like think about more and more is like that feeling of personalization. How do we like bring it to the customer, even though we have personalized recommendations for them, but how do we actually make them feel like it is personalized? We would get like feedback, oh, you just like copy pasted this message, or you just like copy pasted this medication that's like everyone else is getting. But in reality, there was a doctor who did go through the whole like formulation process, like think about like what's the best medication is for that person, but we just didn't convey it from like the customer experience perspective. So from interviews, we've learned that there's one like element like actually personalized experience, which is really, really important, but also making sure that we convey the message to the patient that we did listen to them, like we took these answers, acknowledging it, responding like very to every patient's like mention, making sure that they know it was thought through. So actually explaining how we came up with this prescription or how did we come up with this program for them. Also making sure it's different. So most of our patients like went through, especially in weight loss, they've tried a bunch of diets, they've tried everything else that's like happening in this earth with weight loss, and they have huge trust issues. So like, how are you different? So like a big thing is like taking what they've tried before and actually explaining to them how it is different, and finally like making sure it's real, like not just telling them it's personalized to you and having like all this like, special effects, but actually making sure that the program works for them. For example, in skincare, if you didn't consider someone's skin tone, it can actually like, and you take like a very active ingredient and you're more dark skinned, then it would bleach your like whole face. So making sure that the person knows that we have considered that, and also making sure that the medication actually doesn't bleach their whole face, but rather like particular pigmentation like spot that they had. So yeah, what?
So a lot of empathy in what
Yeah.
you do. So like really putting yourself into that position. I know you talked to me a little bit about like, you know, some people prefer lots of texting versus being on camera and things like that. That if you were going to a doctor, that's not an option. They have to see you, you have to show up. Whereas, you know, you're obviously bridging some of those gaps. We've actually been having a really good time, guys, and we're very close to ending. So I'm going to skip through all these questions and just go throw back to the panel. Any final thoughts, any final bit of advice that you want to leave for our audience around this topic, or next steps, action points, action circles, before we kick over the audience if there's any dying, burning desire questions? No? Maybe? Don't have to.
I'll start. I think just don't underestimate the impact you can have in your organization on this topic, no matter what your role is or what your level is. If it's important to you, you can make a difference, and you can be the one raising that maybe we need to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, +1. Equally, I think, you know, I talked about it before, but get your crew together, get your team together. The more people you're able to bring along on that journey with you, the more impact you're going to be able to have, and equally the longer the more sustained that impact will be. So certainly get everyone together, find that commonality and that passion point that you have, or that energy that you all bring to it, and harness that to do good.
I think I really liked Lauren actual advice at the start when she was talking about going back to your customer persona and making sure that they're all diverse and you have considered different unique needs and characteristic of that patient. I even like going through this whole panel realized, oh, actually, I probably haven't thought about this particular element for this particular persona as much. Like I think in one of my brands, all of the personas are white. Even though I am Asian, I didn't even think about it. So interestingly, like as like the white supremacy dominated the whole thing, even people of color don't even think of representing themselves in its own customer persona, which I find like fascinating. But it is our role to ensure that as a product manager in particular, or a designer, that has been considered in a design, and little changes like this can make a huge difference.
Does anyone in the audience have a question? If you ask it, we'll repeat it. I've probably got time for like 2 or 3. Yeah. Let me just repeat the question for the mic.
Yeah, so the question was, when we talk about educating our own workplaces, what's the best source of information to do that? And I think the answer is it probably depends on the problem that you're trying to solve. So, for example, if you're looking at actually, do we have the right diversity representation within our team to ensure that we're delivering the types of experiences and services that are representative of our customer base, then obviously it would be looking at your internal data and getting a view of where you're sitting across those really important spheres of diversity. Equally, the ability to be able to understand your customers and really getting to the source of actually who are they, and if you're looking at making sure that those services are products and services are diverse, understanding the needs of the customers first. So you know, we talked about 1 in 5 customers will have a disability or an additional need that they need supported. That's the Australian representation and a pretty consistent statistic regardless of what product or service. So, but getting into those details of actually who are our customers and what are their needs, that might be through UX research, it might be through just understanding your customer profiles a little bit more broadly. And then there is a wealth of information, you know, from really trusted sources, be they the Australian government and the recommendations in terms with, be it looking at our web content accessibility guidelines and international standards that we're all accountable for. It is really a choose your own adventure in terms of what research and information is available in the public domain. But I would say have a look internally at the way that your team, the representation within your team, have a look at your customers and try and understand their needs a little bit better. And then you can augment depending on what those needs show.
I think also to Leanna's point, like people learn different ways. So for some people, stats and learning the numbers is going to really hit home. Other people need to see it. You know, they need to see a visual, or they need to see an example. So like, I think when you do, you know, pick a topic or pick a group, like really kind of, I mean, I do a lot of stuff on YouTube. I do so much research on YouTube. It's crazy. Like it's just one of those things where, you know, dig into different things, not just, you know, one type of information, and really convey that to the group. Because as you know, your customers are diverse, your team's also diverse. They're going to absorb in different ways. So, you know, there's probably play into that. Yes, question.
So I have not Zip, but historically worked for organizations where this probably wasn't valued as it's the right thing to do, so let's do it. And I think as much as you can ethically dislike that and want to fight it and argue that we should do it because it's right, you need to play the game and show why it makes business sense to do that, in my view. So if we go back to the stat that 20% of Australians are living with a disability, like there is a really good business case to build your products to include, because otherwise you're cutting out 20% of your market. You know, similar with language or imagery, I think it's actually not hard to build a business case as to why this is important. And the reality is, I think if you are in an organization where, you know, revenue targets are king, then you need to justify it based on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good articulation. And interestingly, certainly what I found over my career is if we look at digital accessibility, for example, if you optimize for accessibility, you also optimize for SEO, which is going to drive traffic and make your propositions more visible for customers. And they are the same constructs by and large that power a screen reader are also what Google indexes for when they're looking at your digital property. So that's one example of a really practical link that can be created between actually we're able to achieve that customer benefit at the same time as achieving that business benefit. And as you start to create those connections between those things, it becomes a really easy conversation. I think we are a lot more fortunate now in the types of cultures that are forming in Australian businesses that there is a level of acceptance, but it's always a really great conversation to be able to have to say, hey, we're going to be doing the right thing. And also, guess what? Here's a clear benefit associated with it.
One more question? No, that's it. Okay, fantastic. I think we should give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience. I got a lot out of that. I hope everyone in the room got a lot out of that. The only thing that I ask is please give us feedback. So if something was really great, tell us. If you want us to improve, if you have ideas for a next topic, slide into my DMs. Make sure you post on social, take photos, share, hashtag Girl Boss Night, tag Zip, tag us, tag your colleagues, and let's have another one of these in a couple of weeks. Thanks, guys. Oh, sorry.
Hey guys, just one more time. That was absolutely incredible. I think we should give another round of applause. Thanks, guys. Honestly, amazing. Hope you all enjoyed it, found it useful. So you guys are also welcome to stay. We have lots of pizzas and some nibbles over here. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So to be able to get downstairs and actually out the door, you will need one of us with these passes. So unless you want to have a sleepover at Zip, just tap one of us in the t-shirts on the shoulders and we'll let you out. But yeah, really appreciate you all. Thanks for coming, and please do stick around, speak to our awesome panelists and everyone else. Thanks.
Thank you.